How did you start this work? Is this something you wanted to work towards, or did something happen in your life and it's you had a maybe epiphany or an opening and something told you, hey, I have to look more into this?
For me, a key experience was coming in contact with the spiritual teachings of ancient India. And in ancient India, there was understanding that the real self is not just the material body, but it's the conscious self that for which the body is a vehicle. So that was a key experience for me. Now, I don't think that this insight is only to be found in the spiritual teachings of ancient India. It's also to be found in many different spiritual traditions. I don't claim to have a monopoly on on truth,
Understand.
but the, so that was a very key experience for me, coming in contact with the spiritual teachings of ancient India.
And I have a question to you that relates to something you call double standards of the scientific community. Like you said, the ancients used to, in my what I have come to see, they used to practice this their mind or their spirit, but not as we know it today, but more as something holistic, including science, knowledge of the universe, about themselves, having to higher their consciousness to even understand higher levels of the universe. Now, the thing is that, for instance, what I cultivate, Falun Dafa, is being persecuted since 10 years now in China. People that believe in it, it's a type of Qigong, meditation. People who practice it get put into forced labor camps and they get forced to sign a paper that says they don't believe in it. But until 10 years ago, it was allowed. And there were even state run medical researches made on the effects of the exercises, which healed and cured many people in ways that the medical society couldn't explain. So, but for one side it was good, and then suddenly, like now, it's being persecuted, and they say it's bad, which it's not. But the same thing I see now in the case of artifacts being found or the subject of ancient civilizations. How can it be that these artifacts are being researched or dated in scientific organization with legitimate scientific methods? How can it then still be that there is such a big part of the scientific community that either doesn't want to acknowledge this information and the facts, uh, and there's a other part that says this is true, but I'm sorry, I can't tell you this openly. I might lose my job, or I might. Do you know where I'm going to? Is this the double standard that you are talking about?
Yes, that is one manifestation of the double standard. But we see this operating in many fields of life. For example, let's say there's a building inspector who works for the city government, and his business is to study buildings and see if they meet the construction codes. So he has a big book full of all kinds of descriptions of the proper way for the electrical system to be installed and the plumbing system and the quality of the concrete and the walls, and there are standards. So let's say he goes to a friend and looks at his building and he passes it. and then he goes to the building constructed by someone he doesn't like, and it's exactly the same, but because he doesn't like it, he applies the rules very, very strictly. So that's a double standard. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and it could also happen with, police. Police, they have some laws. Traffic police have some laws they want to enforce. For example, if the speed limit is 50 miles an hour, then technically anybody that's going over 50 miles an hour should be stopped and given a ticket. But, maybe, the policeman, for somebody he likes, he sees they're going 52 or 53 miles an hour or even 54, and he doesn't stop them and give them a ticket. But then for somebody he doesn't like, maybe he doesn't, like the look of the person or their race or something, and he sees they're going 51 miles an hour, and he'll stop them and ticket them. So he's applying a double standard. He's not enforcing the rules equally. So sometimes this happens in the scientific world. There are certain standards for judging evidence. And for evidence that goes along with the dominant theories in the scientific world, the rules aren't followed very strictly. It just passes. But if there is evidence that radically contradicts a dominant theory, then the rules are applied very strictly. And, a policeman, he could always find some rule. If they want to arrest you, they can always find some rule that you're breaking. Or, if the building inspector wants to condemn your building, he can always find something, some little thing that's wrong
Mm-hmm.
that will enable him to do that. So this is what I call the double standard. Evidence that supports a dominant theory in the scientific world will be judged in one way, and then evidence that radically contradicts the dominant theory will be judged in a very, very strict way. So strict that the evidence that is used to support the dominant theory would also be rejected. So, sometimes this happens in the field of archaeology. I write about this in my book, Forbidden Archaeology.